Hey everybody, welcome to the July episode of Knitting 411. It looks like we've just got a couple people hanging out right now, so I'd love to hear where you're watching from today if you want to leave it in the chat. And I'm just going to check my audio and make sure everything is working over there before we get too far into things. Okay, looks like it's good, so I can mute that. I need to get a producer over here to handle this for me. But anyway, so okay, looks like I'm on the screen. Everything is good. My camera's ready. All right, so let's get into this. All right, so it is time for our knitting 411. So on Friday, I think the Friday before our live stream, I always post a question in the YouTube community asking about your questions for our upcoming live. So we had 9 questions submitted. We're going to go through all of those, and then if anybody is here joining me live, then we will. Oh, and it looks like we've got a few people. I can see a couple there and a couple comments now. Good, we've got some people here. Then we'll also answer your questions as well if you're here with me live. And as always, I want your feedback as well. A lot of the questions this week, I'm like, I don't know. Like there's just different ones about like knitting a blanket and putting backing or quilting on a knitted blanket. Never done that before. So I will be asking you if you've done something like that and if you can offer your feedback as well. Because some of these questions, I'm just like, I don't know. So it's going to be an interesting one. There's quite a few questions where not quite a few, but a couple where I'm like, never done that before, so I'm not really sure. But we're going to get right into that. And one announcement in the fall, I don't really have a date picked out yet, but get that back on the screen. If you want to join the waiting list, my next class or live group coaching program where we'll have like 10 weeks, we'll meet on Zoom once a week for like 10 weeks, probably more like 11 because we have like a little kickoff party as well. The focus for this workshop in the fall is from swatch to sweater, specifically for a drop shoulder knit from the bottom up sweater. And there's going to be sort of 2 tracks. You can either, like me, I've got my yarn already. I'm going to take my body measurements and make my personalized schematic and use my swatch and my measurements to knit a sweater. No pattern needed. You can do that. I'll walk you through the whole process of how you do that. You take your own measurements. We'll draw out a schematic with our measurements and convert that to stitch and row counts based on our swatch. But the other track is if you're not quite feeling comfortable doing that, then you can still join the class and then use a book like maybe Ann Budd's sweater knitting book or Amy Herzog's Ultimate Sweater Knitting Book, some book that has like all of, like different sizes, different gauges, and you can follow along. So the numbers are done for you, and then you would just sort of join the class to help you choose a size and work through all the technical details as you're working on your sweater. So it's up to you which track you want to follow. And every week it'll be on Tuesdays, and I alternate. I'm in the Eastern time zone, so I'll alternate between like Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening for our 1 to 2 hour group coaching sessions for the fall. I haven't like got it on the calendar yet, but it'll be sometime in September, between September, and we'll finish up by early December, more or less, somewhere in that time period. So if you want to get on the waiting list for that, then right on the screen now, tanyaknits.com/workshop, and there's just a little form. You can pop your email address in there. And of course, I'll announce it here on the YouTube channel, but I'll probably send the email to the waiting list first, and then we'll see how many people are interested for that. So if you're interested, there's a link down below for that. I just wanted to announce that first because that is coming up in the fall. So I was thinking I better start telling people about this if I want to do this class. So this is officially our first announcement. So coming up in the fall, we'll have a swatch to sweater class is what I'm calling it. And I think it's going to be a series. Like this one is going to be for a drop shoulder, bottom up, knit in pieces. So knit your front, knit your back, your 2 sleeves, and then sew them all up. Taking a swatch and your body measurements and turning that into a sweater. And then I figure we're going to go through all of the other sort of like sweater construction methods one at a time in the same sort of format, how to take your swatch and your measurements and turn that into a sweater. So probably like twice a year, we'll do that with different sweater constructions. But we're going to start with the simplest, a bottom up knit in pieces, because basically you could, like the simplest one is just like 2 squares, like the one behind me, that's pretty much a drop shoulder, no sleeves on that one. But so something as simple as that, or you can do like some things in the sleeve area to make it a little better fitting. But I'm going to walk you through that whole process. So go to tanyaknits.com/workshop and you can sign up for the waiting list, and it'll be in the link down below as well. So that's coming up in September. So that's the only announcement we have. So let's hop over and see who is hanging out with me here today. New York Knitter is here. Hi, from New York, of course. And then Nurse Kara Knits in New Jersey. So you guys are neighbors, New York and New Jersey. Working on the poppy tee from Petite Knit and ready to learn. Oh, good. I have to put her, I've looked at a few of her patterns, Petite Knit, and I've got a couple. Like she's got some really nice classic designs. I haven't knit any of her patterns yet, but she's on my list. And X Stitch, new knitter here. Hey, welcome. I love to see new knitters. And Mary in Southern California. Hi, Mary. And Kitty in Virginia, knitting a beaded butterfly hat. Oh, that sounds really nice. Oh, and another new knitter. Well, hello, welcome new knitters. I'm glad to have you here. And Deborah in Iowa, working on several things right now. A shawl collar, a shawl collar pullover for my grandson. I don't have any grandbabies yet. My daughter's in her 20s, but nothing on the horizon. But I'm kind of already thinking about like little baby knits for the future. I don't want to scare my daughter. But anyway, there we go. One more. Lynn in Pennsylvania. Hi, Lynn. So good. I'm glad everybody's here. Thank you for hanging out with me today. We're going to get right to the questions that were submitted. So like always, I'll keep an eye on the chat. If you have something to add about any of these questions, like an answer that, I'm not sharing or whatever, like if you have a good answer, then, pop it in the chat. And then, it's just, I like that, we have a good community here and we all share our knowledge, I guess. So you're more than welcome to share that knowledge here with me too, because we've got some questions that I'm not really prepared to answer. But the first one, I think, yes, Kitty, this is your question, isn't it? I have a set of interchangeable bamboo needles and a set of Knit Picks interchangeable needles. I like and use both sets. However, both sets have tips that have become rough. Is there a way to care for wooden needles that will extend their life? My Knit Picks US 6 tips are completely unusable. So if anybody has any ideas for Kitty, then leave a comment for her as well. The only thing I could think of is like some very fine sandpaper and just be very careful about sort of sanding it down. Aren't they generally like sort of like laminated or something like that? I wonder if you could like gently sand them and then maybe even like clear nail polish, like coat them with that. I don't know. It's not something I've ever done, but you could test it. If your US 6s aren't any good anymore at this point, then you could test it out with them and see. I've never had this problem. I don't know. I've got Knit Picks needles as well, and I really like the laminated wood. Like they're very comfortable, very smooth, but I haven't had any issues with roughness. But perhaps you could try like just a really fine sandpaper and gently sand down those edges and some kind of clear something to put over them to protect them, like a nail polish or some kind of a lacquer. I'm not even sure what else would work in that instance. Let me see. Waiting for the comment to load. Bridget has a good tip about that. Maybe some wax. So like the whatever you would put on wood, basically. And there are like waxes that you'd put on wood to protect them, I guess. My only concern with it, I don't know, I've never used like wax for wood or anything. Would that come off on the yarn or anything like that? That would be my only concern. But yeah, I've never had this issue. So anybody else, if you have any thoughts for Kitty, then please share them in the comments. Next question, Camille, looking for patterns for my husband is difficult as he likes loose fit and it's difficult to find patterns for men. It's definitely a challenge. Quite a few patterns say unisex and never have a picture to showcase both male and female. So are they truly unisex or are they for a manly man? My question is, how do you know if that garment is truly unisex and how can I tell if the pattern is right for my husband or any man? Are there any male knitters that struggle with finding patterns for themselves? Good luck with your knitting journey. May your yarn be bright and colorful and tangle-free. Oh, I like that at the end. Now, yeah, I kind of have an issue too with I haven't done much knitting for my husband or men in general, but I do notice when I look, when I looked at the unisex tag, it's just like, I don't know, it's just a lot of designers just tag that even if there's nothing particularly like male about, or for male bodies about the pattern. They just assume, you know, generic measurements. So I'm not sure. Well, but fit wise, it's the same. Like well, it's male bodies, they're just as different as female bodies. Like, you know, use your bust measurement, but you don't if your bust is too large and that's going to give you an like a sweater that's too big. You can get the same issues with men and their bodies as well. Like, you would use that upper torso measurement for them. And I would actually do that upper, like up in the armpit torso measurement as well, not just like around the full chest, because especially if they have broader shoulders, and let's say they get narrower, I got to move back so I can see my hands here on the screen. Like, let's say they're broad in the shoulders and then they get narrow in that, like the full chest area. Then, and you choose a size based on their full chest as well. It could be too narrow in the shoulders. So I would measure that upper torso in the armpits and then also measure the full chest and see how those two compare. If they're about the same, then you're totally fine, but you want to make sure it's going to fit in the shoulders first. And then, like a woman's sweater, look at his body. Like, how is he shaped and how does he want that sweater shaped? You said he likes a loose fit. Like, in general, I mean, men are broad shouldered and then they get kind of narrower at the hips, you know, sort of like the opposite of women. We get hips down there and bums and all that. But that's not like, that's an average as well. And every man's body is different and every man's shape is different. And the way they want their sweaters to fit is different. So you still have to start at the same starting point. Get that upper torso measurement and that full chest measurement. Compare the two. They might be pretty much the same. They might not be. But like the woman's, like if they have broad shoulders, you want to make sure it's going to fit through the shoulders first. And then if it's fitting there, and like you say, he likes a loose fit, I would still make sure it's like fits the upper torso, plus add 2 inches for positive ease so he can move. And then once that part is done, like if you're knitting top down, then you can start adding increases and other things to get it looser through the body. But you still want it to fit in the top. As far as searching for patterns, I don't know. That's still, yeah, it's hard to look. The tagging system, while it's really nice on Ravelry, sometimes, especially when it comes to patterns for men, I don't love it, especially when they're marked unisex, because they just throw whatever in there. So it comes down, I guess, to your husband's personal style and what he likes for sweaters. But as far as fit, start with that upper torso measurement and then use that for like your base size, and then you can start making custom fits from there. And let's see what everybody has to say. Nurse Karen knits. For men, Noragon has great fitting men's patterns, and check Max the Knitter, Les Garçons. Yeah, they're right here in Quebec. So there's 2 recommendations for you, Camille. So Noragon and Max from Les Garçons. Oh, and back to our first question about the needles. Mary says, wood butter, if you would use it on cutting boards. I hadn't heard of wood butter before. That sounds interesting. So you could try that, Kitty. And okay, Kay, men's patterns, could you measure the dimensions of a sweater he already wears and likes and then compare that to knitting patterns? Likely drop shoulder, as it is a boxier fit. And her comment continues, drop shoulder or set in sleeve shoulder rather than a raglan or circular yoke. Yeah, I agree with Kay here. You're probably, yeah, circular yoke and broad shoulders is a little more difficult fit, but definitely drop shoulder, set in sleeves always look nice. And yeah, well, raglan as well you could do, because that gets sort of like that baseball tee, but you do have to be careful with that as well to make sure you're getting a good fit in the shoulders compared to like the rest of the body. You don't want it too oversized in that case either. So our next question is from Rebecca. Do you have a recommendation on the best way to do the increases for shoulder shaping when you want to increase more than 1 stitch per side? I was making a vest where the back yoke is worked separately first with slope shoulders, and the increases were worked knit 1, make 1, knit 1, make 1, knit to the last 2 stitches, make 1, knit 1, make 1, knit 1. However, this resulted in there not being enough yarn in the edge stitches to accommodate the aggressive increases. So the edge where you were supposed to pick up the shoulders was really tight and curling and sort of bubbling out. Is there a better way to do this? Well, first of all, I'm assuming you're using a pattern. It sounds like that, so it's not something you're just sort of making up on your own. And I'm guessing the designer has worked through this issue, so it shouldn't be doing that. I'm wondering what type of increase you're using, like there's even the make one, there's a make one right, make one left, make one open, like that can affect how it looks, or if you're replacing it with a different increase, you could try different increases. I would think just adding 2 stitches on each side of your shoulder is not, I wouldn't call that aggressive increasing. But you could also, I would try different increases to see if something works better. Pick up for the shoulders. Okay, so maybe cast on and knit at least 1 or 2 rows first before you start doing the increases. And that way you have like a stronger pickup line without the increases getting in the way. Or you could maybe just cast the stitches on at the edge instead of working the increases in the fabric. I mean, I don't know this pattern in particular, so I'm not quite sure how that works. But yeah, I would test different increases. 2 at each side doesn't seem like a lot. I don't know why that would be causing it to curl and bubble out. Unless it's like every single row, then that's a lot. So maybe it would be better to cast on the stitches at the end, you know, like you knit to the end, turn the work, and then use like the knit cast on to cast on stitches, and then work to the other end and do the same thing on that end as well. Okay, Kay's got a comment about this as well. Oops, let me get these comments out of the way. Okay, I recently knit the Keep Me Satisfied top, and it has some tighter make one increases, and to accommodate that, it has some yarn overs that were then dropped on the next row. That's a really good idea. So that's, who was that commenter again? Rebecca. So there's I really like that idea, Kay. Thank you for sharing that. So yes, you could do your increases, but do a yarn over just after them as well. And then, yeah, you can drop that and that'll give you a little extra give. Really good. Thank you, Kay, for sharing that. So you got a few options there, Rebecca. Hopefully something works for you. Okay, we've got a few more people that popped in. Let me see if I can find the first one. Oh, did we have you at the beginning, Lynn? I don't remember. Hey, from Pennsylvania. And Marianne in Massachusetts. Hi, Marianne. Back down to the beginning. Oh, there we are. Oops, lost my mouse there for a second. And then Cindy. Hi, Cindy in Redondo Beach, California. Foggy there today. Oh, it's hot here today. I got to turn my AC on in a minute with the window open right now, but it's pretty warm. Okay, so that was our first 3. I think 3, yes. We've got about, I think, 8 questions altogether that were submitted ahead of time. Okay, so Gillian's question. I'm currently making a scrap busting. Okay, yes, this is a question. If anybody is a quilter or a sewer and a knitter, then please, please chime in with what you have, anything you have to share with Gillian. She's currently making a scrap busting mitered square blanket with leftover sock yarn. Some of the yarn is merino, but some is commercial sock yarn and a bit rougher. I think I might need to add a soft backing fabric, like making a quilt, but not sure how to achieve that. Do I need batting? Does it need quilted? And can I use my sewing machine on knitted fabric? So, I don't know. I've got a couple scrap blankets, a couple in progress. I have never added a backing to them. I know I've seen that before, so I know it can be done. I'm not sure it would need to be like some batting or anything. I think like knitted blankets are already pretty warm. So I don't think it needs batting inside, but you can add a backing. I've never done it myself, so I don't know how to do it, but I know it's a possibility. But I'm also not sure about like if I would like machine quilt it, like the pattern on top. I don't know if I would do that either. But you can like you can combine fabric and knitted fabric. Like you could put a back on there and sew it along the sides. How to attach the 2 pieces together, I'm not so sure. Maybe like little quilt ties so that you can tie on. I don't know if it would be safe to like do machine sewing on there. Does anybody have anything for Gillian? I'll leave that one there. I don't know, Gillian. I'm not going to be any help with this question at all. But hopefully somebody else can chime in, maybe come back in a few days after like the live has been on, and like people who are going to watch this over the next few days, you might get some more answers. I'm afraid I'm not going to be any help with this question though. And Nurse Kara knits. 2 questions. One is about row gauge. I'm always off. Me too. I'm fairly consistent, bang on for stitch gauge, but my row gauge is usually tighter, but sometimes more loose. It's often easy enough to adapt, and I usually swatch mostly to see if I like the fabric I'm getting and adjust anyway, but I'm wondering if there are any tricks I should be trying. My general sense is that my penchant, I don't know how to say that, for using a different yarn than the pattern suggests is the main cause. Okay, that's your first question. We'll do that one first. It's pretty common. I don't, yeah, it could be yarn, could be your, like sometimes if you change like the needle material, like you try like bamboo or metal or something, that can change your row gauge as well. But I'm with you. I hardly ever match both stitch and row gauge. And in most cases, it's not that huge a deal. You could try different needle materials if you want to try to get a better match. Sometimes you want to, especially like, let's say you're doing a sweater that has a color work yoke and you've got, you know, a certain number of rows you have to do for all of that color work, but your row gauge is, let's say it's looser, so your yoke is going to be a lot deeper than the designer's unless you can do something to adjust your row gauge. Most instances it doesn't matter, but there are those times where you do need to pay attention to row gauge. So the one thing I know people try is changing the needle material. Like if you get one gauge on metal needles, then you use bamboo needles, then your stitch gauge might stay the same, but your row gauge might change. That's really all I've ever done. But in general, I would just like calculate if it's a sweater. I would look at the different areas that might be important for a specific row gauge and see, you know, if things are okay or what I can do to change, if I have to change something to adjust for row gauge. In most instances, you know, it just tells you to knit to a certain amount length anyway, so you can just use your own gauge for that. But I don't have any. Does anybody else have any ideas for Nurse Kara? Doesn't look like it yet. But that's, yeah, I think it's just the nature of every knitter is different. Everybody holds their needles and their yarn and tensions differently. So it's very, very common to not meet the same gauge as designers. And I would even say that some designers now, they have such a loose gauge. Like I see the gauge, I'm like, what? Like to me, it's too loose. I like a little firmer gauge so my garment's gonna hold up a little better. Sometimes that loose gauge is not so great for some things. But you could try, if you have different sets of needles, try and see if that changes. There is also a point where your gauge isn't gonna change. Like the yarn, like you have some yarn, sorry I'm out of frame, I'm trying to grab some yarn here. Got this bulky yarn, you know. I could try to knit this on like a US 2, you know, probably usually use like a 10 or something for this yarn. I could try to go down like a super small needle, but at some point, the stitches aren't going to keep getting smaller and smaller, even if I'm trying to use like a US 2, because the thickness of the yarn, it can only compact and compress itself so much, and that row gauge can't change. So you can keep trying to change needle sizes until you find like where it's not going to change anymore. That's like as tight as the fabric can get. And then you can kind of play with needle material and needle size to adjust the row gauge. But the stitch gauge, when you're getting it tighter and tighter, isn't going to change too much, because like the thickness of that yarn, you can only compress that so far. You can't put like 8 stitches, you know, in an inch with bulky yarn, because it's just, the yarn is too thick. It's not going to get that small. So you can like play around with see how tight you can go. And there's going to be a point where like you can get to really small needles, but nothing changes, because like the yarn just is not going to get any smaller, no matter what needle size you use. Ooh, it's getting warm in here. Time to go turn on my air conditioner when we're done. Okay, and Jess, hey, I've been wanting to learn how to knit continental. Any tips? Okay, so yes, I can answer this one. And I would say this for any new type of knitting. If you want to knit in your right hand, your left hand, you want to try like the yarn, what is it, Portuguese, it's around your neck. Anytime you want to try a new knitting method where you have to hold and tension the yarn differently, then what I did, because I was a left-handed knitter first, and then I wanted to learn how to hold the yarn in my right hand as well, especially when I'm doing stranded color work. I like a yarn in each hand. That's my preference. So to learn how to do that, I went to Michael's or Walmart, I don't even know where, I just got a big skein, like it was probably a couple 100 grams, just a big skein, worsted weight yarn. And I had needles that were like appropriate for the yarn or whatever. I think it was like probably a worsted, like medium Craft Yarn Council 4. And then I just cast on enough stitches to do like a scarf. And then I just started knitting. But my one rule was I had to do 10 minutes a day, and I had to only use my right hand. I could not, I mean, I had to hold one of the needles in my left, but the yarn had to be in my right hand the whole time while I was knitting. And I did. I made myself do it. I had to do 10 minutes a day to practice, because you can't learn a new skill if you don't actually practice it. So a little bit every single day, and then I could reward myself with some other knitting project. But yeah, I went and I just picked out some yarn. It was just acrylic, but it was fun. It was like this really white, sparkly, really fun looking. I liked it. So I just knit a garter stitch scarf. And I would think if I did it now, I would go with just working on the knit stitch until I felt super comfortable. And then I think I would start introducing the purl stitch as well. I did not do that, and I still have difficulties purling with my right hand. It's not my favorite thing to do. Can do it if I have to, but I'm not great at it. So maybe I need to get another skein of yarn and just practice purling with my right hand to do a whole scarf and garter stitch, but purl instead. But I think that would work for you, Jess, or for anybody who wants to learn, is it Portuguese where it's around your neck? And then, knitting in your right hand, knitting in your left, whichever hand you want to hold it in. Whenever you have a new technique, yeah, a little bit of time every single day, and then just work through like 200 grams of yarn or whatever until, you get comfortable with that method. That's really my only tip. Like, you just have to do it, and you have to keep practicing until it becomes second nature. Okay, let me see. We do have, move this one up. Cindy, did we say hello to you yet? Hi, Cindy in Idaho. I don't think we did. Oh, and Jaleisha finally made it to one of these live. Good, I'm glad you're here. And then Kay has a good comment about continental checkout. Lots of videos of folks knitting this way. How one person holds the yarn can be vastly different than the next. You will need to find what feels right for you. Absolutely true. Yes, people have asked me if I would post a video of how I knit, and I don't want to, because I hold my yarn really weird. Like, I don't know if I would recommend the way I hold my yarn. I was a crocheter first, and I tension the yarn around like my second finger instead of my first. And I don't know, like, and then I have a tendency when I'm purling to pull down on the yarn, which makes it tighter. So that's not great. I've had to find ways to compensate for that. So I don't love to show people how I knit, because I don't think it's not ideal. It's not ideal. But you really do, like Kay says, you have to find the way that's comfortable for you. So it is helpful to see other knitters and see how they hold their yarn. Excuse me. Which fingers they wrap it around to tension it. That would be the one thing. Like, I think I would do that as well. I would try to move away from like dropping the yarn, making the new stitch, dropping the yarn. The goal, I mean, for me was to I didn't want to knit super fast, but I wanted to be consistent, and I didn't like having to drop the yarn. That's how I knit with my right hand at first. So when I was knitting that scarf, my rule was I had to hold the yarn in my hand as much as possible so I could practice like tensioning it and not letting it go while I was making each stitch. But yeah, it can be really helpful to go look at other people and see how they knit. If you have like a yarn shop, go see if people will show you. A lot of people like to show off how they knit, so it's something you could ask them. But yeah, Kay is right. Go just go look for all the knitters on YouTube and see if they have any videos of how they hold their yarn. Okay, a couple more questions. Oh, you had a second part, didn't you, Kay? Or not? Let me see, where was I? Did I miss somebody's? Oh, I did. Let me go back there. Nurse Kara, I missed your other question, didn't I? Let me go back. Where was I? My second question is kind of silly, and the answer is probably just pay attention. But I've worked very diligently to neaten up my knitting this year, and I still seem to get those pesky elongated stitches where I've accidentally knit into the stitch below. Aside from the obvious pay attention, any tips? Any tips for Nurse Kara? I think you already answered it. You have to pay attention. Like, I try to knit sometimes though without looking at my hands to see, well, just I like to practice to see if I can do it. Not if it's something complicated, but plain stockinette, you know, or purling or whatever. Um, just usually purling I find harder. Knitting I can do, but maybe just letting, because it's usually when it's happened is when we're not paying attention. So, but I know sometimes you're knitting and you don't want to have to look at it and pay attention all the time. So maybe it's a matter of you have to see, make sure your fingers understand how the stitches should feel as you're making them. Because it is a bit different if you're knitting below instead of like into the correct stitch that's against the needle. So maybe you have to like practice that part, practice not looking and knitting consistently. So when it comes to those times you're not paying attention, that you're not making, you know, that elongated stitch where you're knitting below, which I've done that plenty of times too. It is very annoying to find that in your work. But yeah, I don't really have any tips about that either. If anybody does, pop them in there. But yeah, my only tip would be like to practice not looking on purpose and see if like your fingers can start to feel how the stitches are made. And then maybe try to intentionally do a knit one below and see how it feels different compared to the other stitches. I don't know. I'm not much help with this one either. Oh, and there you are, Nurse Kara. Always happens when I'm doing stockinette in the round. Yeah, and either reading or watching TV. I know. I don't want you to have to stop watching TV or reading because yes, that I do the same. I like to you want to knit and relax. So I don't know if anybody else has any ideas on that, but yes, you kind of. Oh, I hate to say you have to pay attention because I don't want to pay attention all the time either. So I totally understand that. Oh, I didn't answer the. I'm getting way ahead of myself. When people put 2 questions, it throws me off when I realize I forgot one. Let me go through and make sure I didn't miss any of the other ones. Okay, we're good. I didn't miss any others. Okay, so Mama Chris knits. I have a tension question. I'm usually a sock knitter. I've been inspired by you and a couple other YouTubers to try knitting a raglan sweater. I've tried 3 times now, but end up frogging for the same issue. The pattern I'm using has a 2x2 ribbed neckline. It suggests using a smaller size needle for the ribbing and then going up 1 size for the rest of the body. I'm using a cotton linen blend. The 1 purl stitch on every 2x2 rib is stretched out. No matter how I pull it or what size cord I use on my circular needle, it's stretching out every first purl stitch. It looks horrible, like every 3rd stitch looks laddered. Is the yarn? Maybe I should try knitting the neckline on DPNs. Okay, couple things here. First of all, it can be your needle size. If you're not using a small enough circular needle, it can stretch out your knitting. Second thing is very common for that first purl after a knit because you're moving back and forth between a knit and a purl. So there's actually extra yarn between the 2 stitches and it sort of migrates back to that knit stitch and it makes it bigger. So that's very common to have that happen. This is why people generally go down in needle size, is to help fix that issue. There are different things you can do. If you are like follow the Western standard stitch mount where the right leg's in the front, so you're wrapping the yarn so it's always the right leg. If you wrap the yarn in the reverse direction when you purl, that's going to use less yarn. But when you come back to it on the next, if you're knitting in the round or whatever, you have to pay attention because it's going to be mounted with the left leg in the front. So you want to make sure you are knitting it through the back leg or you're going to end up with a twisted stitch. But that can help with that issue. Going down needle size, yes, what else? I find the Eastern, like just wrapping the yarn differently didn't help me enough with mine, but the Norwegian purl, which feels a little finicky, actually worked really well, but it only worked really well in like wool-based yarns, which leads me to the next thing. I'm not sure what the structure of your yarn, but if it's a plain plied yarn and it's cotton and linen, it's not a good choice for a top-down. If you're knitting a top-down raglan sweater and there's no seams, a plant fiber yarn, unless it's like a chainette yarn, is not a good choice. Like cotton and linen, it's not very elastic. All your stitches, every wonky stitch is going to be more noticeable because it's not as forgiving as wool. Wool has some elasticity, acrylic as well. So it's a lot more forgiving when it comes to like the ribbing and stuff like that. Cotton and linen, not great for that. Ribbing especially can look more messy than normal. And if you want to do a raglan sweater, I would suggest you get a different yarn. Unless it's like some sort of a yarn that has some structure in it, like it's a chainette yarn, then you're okay because there's some structure in the yarn itself. But if it's just a simple, 2-3 ply yarn and it's cotton and linen, that's not good for a top-down sweater because there's no seams and you need seams for structure. The whole weight of that sweater is sitting on your cast-on edge. And with wool, that's totally fine because wool is very elastic and it wants to hold its shape. Except for superwash, that's a different beast. But natural untreated wool, very elastic, wants to hold its shape. The yarn wants to stick together, so it's going to stay in place so you can get away without having seams. You cannot do that with plant fiber yarn. They need some seams, or they need some structure, or they need to be knit much more tightly because they don't have any elasticity and they're heavier, so it starts drooping and sagging and you've got no seams to hold it in place. So it's just kind of an all-around mess. So could be any number of those things. It could be that you're like trying to use a larger circumference circular needle than you should. Could be your yarn. And yeah, 2x2 rib, it's very common to have that issue of like that larger stitch before the purl stitch. Anybody else have any thoughts? Anything I missed for that one for Mama Chris Stitz? Hopefully that helps. That was a lot, I think, on that one. Okay, I don't see anything about that specifically. We will come back to the comments in a bit though. One more question. I knit using the continental method and I want to be fast, but I have a problem when I knit the stitches on the left needle and transfer them to the right needle. I am forced to waste time moving the yarn from the bottom of the left needle to the top of it, and I'm very slow at that. I want a method to quickly bring the yarn up along the left needle from the bottom to the top so I can knit faster. I don't know if there's a method for this, but it is just sort of a matter of being mindful of, while you're knitting and moving stitches with the right needle, using your left hand to sort of conveyor belt up the next stitches. I was thinking about this question while I was knitting, and I kind of use my left hand to sort of like grip, I'm trying to get my hand in the frame here, grip the fabric and sort of move it up. So as I'm knitting with this hand is kind of moving some stitches up, but then I do stop and kind of shift a whole bunch up the needle. But I find if I can, like, the time when I pause, I shift and there's a whole bunch up there, I can use my left hand for a while, just kind of slowly moving them up like conveyor belt. As they're moving to the right, I'm using my left hand to pull them up until it's starting to stretch out too much. Then I stop and I pull a bunch up. It can be helpful if you're using circular needles to use a smaller one than you think. Sometimes if you've got a long cord, you're letting like a whole garment or whatever it is you're knitting sort of stretch out along that cord. So if you give it less cord to stretch out on, the stitches are more bunched together, so you can move them a little more quickly. I can't say there's a method though for like quickly moving the yarn. You just have to sort of build that habit, like get intentional about moving the yarn with your left hand as your right hand is doing its job. But maybe somebody else will have something. That's it for questions. So let's go to the comments and see what anybody has added to say about this. Oh, it's getting warm in my house now. It's about this time of the day where the sun's right overhead and I can start to feel the heat. But I like to have the fresh air, and then eventually I'll have to shut the windows and turn the air conditioning on because it gets very warm. Okay. Cindy, we said hi to you already. Jaleisha, yes, you're here for your first time. Kay's comment. Okay, Jaleisha, there's another comment. Let's move you up. Happy to have you here too, Jaleisha. I'm glad you were able to get here live. I'm a continental knitter. Personally have found tensioning my yarn around my pinky and then over my pointer finger. Yeah, so there you go. Whoever was asking a comment about how to knit continental, that's Jaleisha's tip, is around the pinky and then the pointer. So now you kind of have to play around with which fingers you like to have your yarn around, and everybody's going to be different. And another one from Jaleisha. I was watching a video yesterday to keep it even edge stitches, and one of the tips I saw was to make sure you don't stretch out the edge stitch as you knit or purl it. Yes, it's very easy to do that and kind of let your needles come apart, especially on the edges. I like to keep my needle tips pretty close together. Oh, and Jillian, her comment about practicing continental. I chose the Cozy Classic Raglan to learn continental. I'm faster with English. I hold the needles close to the tips and flick the yarn with minimal hand movement. Yeah, I do the, well, yeah, I think my left hand, it's not much movement. My right hand is a lot more movement than my left, that's for sure. But yes, definitely choose one pattern and just work on that whole pattern. Or if you just want to, just garter stitch scarf, you don't really need a pattern for that. But yeah, just pick a project and you can only use that hand or that technique until you've got it down. Another one from Jillian. I wrap the pearl yarn clockwise when doing ribbing. I just knit pearls for succeeding rows through the back loop. Yes, so basically, yeah, it's the same as like Western and Eastern stitch mount. It's the same thing, just different words. So yes, we're on the same page, Jillian. And Dorothy says that she does the same thing. And Jaleisha, as a continental knitter, when I purl, I make sure to knit the tips with the tips closer together to keep the tension tighter. I also will stop and pull the yarn if I feel I have looser stitches. Yeah, I try not to pull too much because I don't want to make them too small. And I was one of those super tight knitters at first. But yes, you definitely want to keep your tips close together as you're knitting, because if you have them like far apart and you're like putting both of your, I don't have any needles right here beside me, like you're putting your right needle in and it's like on the stitches on both barrels, you're making your stitches bigger than they have to be. Like definitely use the tips. You're going to get better, more consistent fabric that way. Okay, and for knitting faster, Nurse Karen Knit says, for the stitches stacked up on the left needle, push the left needle tip in when you take the worked stitch off the needle, and definitely keep a handful of stitches scrunched up in your left palm. Yeah, conveyor belt, definitely. So does anybody have any questions that they want to talk about? Because that was all the pre-submitted questions. Ooh, it's warm in here. Now, I will say I'm going to be on a vacation. Next week is podcast week, and then I'm going to take a couple weeks off, 3 weeks from videos, and then I might, hopefully, we'll see, be back for our next live stream. Will be in a month, in August. I wrote down the date. Where is it? Oh, August 19th, so Tuesday. That will be our next live stream because, yeah, we usually have a knit and chat at the beginning of the month, but I'm taking some time off. I'm going to go visit my family in Maine and just relax. We're not doing anything else, just hanging out at home, getting some house stuff done, like it's vacation time. I got to do a few things, but, oh, okay. Question from Kay. So that will be it though for live streaming. We won't be back until August 19th, and we'll have another Knitting 411 then. So Kay's question, I love the look of twisted rib, but I despise purling through the back loop. Is there a hack to get a twisted purl without the back loop? Yes, I just have to picture it in my head. You just want to, yeah, reverse the way you wrap. Whatever stitches are going to be purled, let's say you're doing it in the round because it's just easier in that case. And you have to purl through the back loop, which is in normal like Western stitch mount, we have the right stitch or the right leg of the stitches in the front and the left leg is in the back. So when you purl through the back loop, you are purling through that left leg to twist it. So if when you're creating the stitch, you wrap the yarn in the opposite direction, I'm trying to picture, yeah, you would get the left leg in the front, and then you could purl through the front, technically through the front leg, but it would be the left leg and it would twist it. I just think it would twist it in a different direction. I'm trying to picture how that would work. If you come through the left and go this way, it twists it in this direction. If the left is already there and you're purl, it's gonna, yeah, it is gonna twist it in a different direction. I don't know, okay. I've got to like picture this in my head. You can mount the stitch so it's in the front though, that left leg. But it is going to twist counterclockwise or whatever the opposite is. It's not going to be like if you had twisted it through the left if it were in the back. But yeah, you could try like wrapping the yarn the opposite. So, well, I'm guessing you probably do like a Western stitch mount where the right leg is in the front. So you could wrap your yarn so the left leg is in the front instead, and then see how, then you can technically still purl through the front leg, but it's still going to twist the stitch. But yes, it will twist it in a different direction. So I'm not sure if you're working flat, that's going to affect, especially if they're stacking up, they'll be twisting one way and then twisting the other. That might not work. I don't know. I need to get out a swatch and try this now. You've got me wondering. Let me see if anybody else has any thoughts. Yeah, Nurse Carrie knits. Purling through the back loop isn't as bad if you do the wrap the other way. Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah, you have to test it out and see. And now I'm trying to think about how that would look. Yeah, I don't know. I want to go. It's in my head now to like get some knitting out and test this to see if I can wrap so I don't have to purl through. Because I don't love purling through the back loop either, especially when it's like really small yarn. I'll have to try that out, Kay, and tell us how that works if you do the like wrapping the yarn in a different direction. So Jaleisha has a question as well. Does anyone have any tips working with smaller yarn? I'm venturing into working with sock fingering weight yarn when I normally work with worsted or DK. So everybody share your tips with Jaleisha. Let me think. You could do, if it's just like the matter that it's thinner yarn and you want to just get used to it, maybe knit a shawl that uses like sock yarn, but like US 4 needles. And then like your needles are still not super small, but you're getting the feel of the sock yarn. It's going to be a looser gauge, of course, because it's a shawl and not a sock. But that might be a good way to sort of transition. You could just jump right in and knit a sock. I mean, you could definitely do that. Or knit something that you're used to knitting, but use sock yarn instead. Like if, like, let's say, hey, maybe you've knit like slipper socks with a DK weight yarn, then that you know how to do the sock already. So the new skill would be like the sock weight version of that. Or like if you love to knit hats, then knit a hat that is, using sock yarn or fingering weight yarn. So you already have the hat experience and you're just adding like some new experience to that. So you're getting used to the hats. Can be good too, because they're usually not like, socks are the only thing where you want to get like a super tight gauge so it can be a little more finicky, but everything else is, even though it's a sock yarn, the needles are a little bit larger, so it's like a looser gauge. So I would say maybe start with that if you're concerned about like really tight gauge and really small needles like you'd need for a sock. Then start with something that uses needles that are a little bit larger but still with sock yarn. Let's see. Kay has a comment about that. My tip for fingering weight yarn, I find I always grasp my needles tighter when knitting with finer yarn. So my tip is to loosen that grasp. Oh, that's a really good tip, Kay. Yeah, that I find, yeah, it depends sometimes on the needles. Like if you're trying to use like shorty needles, I find that I get super tight on those. So pay attention, yeah, to how you are feeling as you're using like new needles, new yarn, whatever, and make sure you're relaxing. That's really good advice. And Jaleisha says, thank you for Kay. Yeah, you guys are just having your own chats over there. Oh, and Nurse Kara says to try making 2 swatches to practice. Yeah, swatches are always good. I don't know why people are scared of swatching. It's not just to get your gauge. It can be for other things as well, even just to test something out. And oh yeah, with one with slippery needles and one with grippier needles. Yes, that's true. If you have like a sock yarn and sock yarn can be kind of slippery, then a grippier needle can be a good choice so your stitches aren't sliding all over the place. That's really good advice. You guys are full of good advice today. So we don't have any more questions. Pop them in if you do. But I think that's pretty much it. So we'll go to our end screen. I'll wait and see if there's any more questions. We are not quite at our hour mark. I'll hang out for an hour if there are questions, but if there's not, then I don't really have anything else to say. Besides, it's very warm. Ooh, I'm getting sweaty. But the link is on the screen, tanyaknits.com/workshop. So if you want to like join the next swatch to sweater class, then that will be coming up in sometime September-ish. I don't have a date for that yet. But if you are interested in knitting a bottom-up drop shoulder sweater, either from scratch with your own swatch or from like, let's say you have a book like Ann Budd's book or Amy Herzog's book that has like all the numbers for you, then you can sort of have the numbers without having to work that out as well if you're brand new to sweater knitting. But that will be coming up, so you can join the waiting list to be the first to hear about it. So I'll be on vacation for a few weeks. I'll have a podcast next week and then no videos until the podcast in August, but I will probably pop on the week before the podcast for our next Knitting 411. Hopefully, we'll see. I might not. We'll see how I am. If I'm trying to get back into the work groove, I might not have time for a live stream that week. But I will post on the Friday before asking for your questions or anything like that. Let me see. Okay, that looks like just everybody saying thank you and talking to each other. No more questions or chats there. So, I'm glad you were all able to join too. So welcome to those who are new, especially you, Jaleisha, and your great questions. And Kay, thank you so much for all of your wisdom for sharing today. Mel, yeah, you just missed it. I'm just about to wrap up, but you can watch the replay, I guess. But I'm glad you're here and you made it for the last few minutes. But that is it for this episode. So if you're new here and you want to catch past episodes of Knitting 411, I'll put the playlist here on the screen. You can see what other questions came up, and I always put the timestamp links so you can pop around to the questions that interest you without having to watch the full hour. And if you've been around for a while, I'll put a video here for YouTube to recommend that you might have missed. And that's it for today. So I'll see you in the next stream. Bye, everybody.